Germany often gets a bad rap when it comes to how bureaucratic things tend to be. But after 5 years of living in Germany, we've learned there are some things about life in Germany that is actually, well, simpler. Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie, and along with my wife Aubrey, we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our baby, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. In past videos, I've described the insane bureaucratic nonsense that we have to go through as just a normal part of life in Germany, and this isn't just a foreigner complaining about life in another country. This is something that our German audience is also well aware of is just a part of life in Deutschland at times. As I've talked about some of these cumbersome processes, I've often included a little inside joke for our German viewers of overlaid videos from an asterisk and obelisk cartoon. In this cartoon, a character must try and obtain a Pass A38 from a fictitious authority, and he ends up on a wild goose hunt as one office sends him to another, to another, to another, to another to mock ridiculous bureaucratic processes we are all far too familiar with over here. However, not everything in Germany is so difficult. In fact, there are many things that we have learned that Germany has done to make life actually a lot easier and less complicated than what we've experienced in the US. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today in my video. A bureaucratic nightmare, or just a headache here and there? Let me ask you a question. If you live in a country, work in that country, and spend all your time in that country, would you be very happy if another country demanded you pay taxes to them? After all, what benefits are you benefiting from if you aren't even living in the country where your tax dollars are being spent? Well, welcome to the life of an American citizen living abroad. Most countries in the world take one of two approaches to taxes: a territorial-based taxation system in which a government only taxes individuals for income sources earned inside their borders, or two, a residence-based taxation system in which a government taxes residents on all income earned from local and foreign sources, and non-residents in these countries only have their local income taxed. In fact, this is the system Germany has in place. In Germany, there is the 183-day rule, which basically says if you live at least 183 days in a foreign country, work there, and the employer is also not a resident of Germany, you don't have to pay German taxes. Easy. However, there is an ultra rare third category known as citizenship-based taxation systems. It is so rare that only the United States and Eritrea have this system. In this system, countries require citizens of their nations to pay taxes back to them even when they are not living or working in that country, simply because they have the passport of that country, aka like me. Now note, this does not actually necessarily mean you have to pay the American government any money if you're an American living abroad and earning income. Here's where it gets even more complicated, cumbersome, frustrating, and yes, bureaucratic. There are ways of getting your income excluded from paying taxes through credits and exclusions, like using, for example, the foreign earned income exclusion. For 2023, American citizens were able to exclude up to $120,000 of foreign earned income from American taxes using this exclusion. However, there are complicated exceptions to this exception, like passive income doesn't count for this exclusion as one example. But what's really important to know, no matter what, you are not excluded from filing returns if you live and work outside of the US, so the American government can check up and make sure you don't owe them something. And on top of that, if you are an American living abroad and have foreign bank accounts that at any point in the year had over $10,000, you have to report that to Uncle Sam by submitting a foreign bank account reporting form, just so they are aware that you have a sizable stash of cash abroad. They just like knowing that information, I guess. All of this can be very overwhelming and difficult to do on your own because of all the laws, exceptions to the exceptions, and threat of the American government eventually coming after you no matter where you are in the world. Therefore, taxes for American citizens abroad require specific knowledge and expertise, most of which citizens abroad, like myself, have had no reason to learn before moving abroad. Therefore, somebody like the sponsor of today's video, Expats Overseas, is the perfect partner to help filing American and local taxes. Expat Overseas has helped over 18,500 Americans with US returns overcome this daunting tax process, evident by their phenomenal reviews on Trustpilot. Along with their incredible human support who are quick to answer any questions and average turnaround times of just 2 weeks after submitting all documents, they also offer an easy-to-use digital tax organizer to simplify submitting your information. And let me tell you, when you have to file returns in 2 different countries, it can be frustrating working with accountants in both countries who can only file for that country. Expats Overseas simplifies this by being able to file returns in the US and your resident country so you don't have to submit everything twice. I'll leave a link to their website in the description and you can contact them to get a personal intake form and a free tailored quote today. Germany also often gets a bad rap, and honestly, often rightfully so, for being very digitally behind. We've talked countless times about how shocking it was when we first moved here to find how cash dependent Germany still was after not handling cash in the US for years, or just how many cumbersome processes in the fatherland still requires snail mail rather than online functions. For example, for my Kindergeld application, they have transitioned to allowing all the required application documents to be uploaded online rather than following the old procedure of having to rely on mailing in all the documents. But I had to print off a verification page, sign it, and mail that by post before they accepted the online documents, again to avoid having to mail anything into them. However, there is one area in which the US is archaic, even in comparison to Germany, and that is paying for rent. For all of the housing we rent in the US, we always had to write an old school physical paper check and either mail it or drop it off with our landlord. Now, I will be honest and say that I initially thought about including this in the video, but then thought about how I always like to mention in our videos that we are originally from a southern US state called Oklahoma and now live in the southwestern German state of Rhineland-Pfalz. And I mention this because some differences may actually be just specific to these 2 places rather than both countries as a whole, so I thought maybe it is more of just an Oklahoma thing to pay rent by checks, or maybe since we moved from the US about 6 years ago, things had changed by now, so it wouldn't really be fair to include this in a Germany versus USA video. However, in 2022, JP Morgan reported that about 78% of rent payments are still paid using old school checks and money orders. In Germany, when we first moved here and set up a bank account, we tried to figure out how to order a checkbook so that we would be able to pay for rent since that is what we were accustomed to, but we were blown away to learn that even our elderly landlords wanted payments to simply be wired directly from bank account to bank account. In fact, one blogger posted online that nobody in Germany has written a check in decades. When I arrived in 2000, checks were already obsolete. Now, I simply set up an automatic payment for our rent rather than every month digging out the checkbook, filling out the ancient form of payment, dropping it off, and waiting for my landlord to deposit the check and be debited from my account. So for Germans, I would be interested in knowing, when was the last time you actually saw a paper check? And would you even know how to use one today? When I first came to Germany as a foreign exchange student in 2014, I distinctly remember having dinner with my German host family one night and my German host mom asking me how I wasn't fat and asking how many of my family was fat. This, of course, is prime example of the stereotypical image Americans have in their minds of German directness, and that was a bit of a culture shock for me, but the question stemmed from the stereotypical image Germans have in their minds of an American being a rather obese individual with a Big Mac and an extra large Coke in hand. Well, 30.7% of Americans are overweight and 42.4% of Americans are obese. In Germany, surprisingly, there's actually a higher percentage of people overweight than in the US at 34.5% of Germans, but a significantly lower number of obese obese Germans at only 19%. Now, there are a lot of factors at play here that cause this difference in obesity rates, but for me personally, I was excited to see some pretty major differences here in food that seemed to make it way easier to eat healthier and attempt to stay leaner than what we experienced in the US. Now, of course, given the choice between, say, an apple and a deep fried Oreo, you're pretty easily able to assess which one of these items is indeed healthier. However, there are some foods that I may genuinely not be too sure of exactly how healthy or unhealthy it really is, or I may just lack self-control and accountability at times and spring for unhealthy snacks over fruits and veggies like I probably should. Well, in Germany, one thing that makes it much easier to make a healthier decision and add some accountability is the Nutri-Score on food packaging. The Nutri-Score label is a relatively new thing in Germany, only becoming officially introduced in Germany in 2020. Basically, it consists of a label with a score from A to E, with A being the highest health rating and E being the lowest. Generally, the more fatty, salty, or sweet a food, the lower the score. It is a voluntary label they can add to help consumers with their food choices. Now, there are issues with this score, so it shouldn't be and can't be taken as a perfect dietary informational guide, as the way that the grades are given has some flaws to it. Brands try and find sneaky ways of marketing foods as healthier than they really are, giving some things like chocolate powder that is made up of 70% sugar a Nutri-Score of B, for example. How did Nesquik do this? Well, this powder is classified as a dairy product and not as a drink because you are supposed to mix it into milk. And because of the health benefits of milk, they can rate it as a little bit healthier. However, if Nestle used full fat milk for the rating, then they would have to mark this product as C. And although per capita sales for whole milk is higher than low fat milk, Nestle uses a serving suggestion of low fat milk in combination with just a small teaspoon of their powder to give it a B rating. If we looked at the powder alone, which in their defense, I don't know who eats the powder alone, this would have to be rated as a D. So yes, there are flaws, but I have found it as a nice bit of accountability. As I grab chips I don't need, see the glaring red D, and it makes me more conscious about the decision I'm making, or maybe just a little bit more guilty as I eat them anyways, making me less likely to get them again. Maybe. But overall, no matter how imperfect the system may be, I do appreciate some effort going into making it easier to clearly see how potentially healthy or unhealthy foods are that we may normally buy without really thinking about it. Now that I live in Germany, I don't spend money like I did in the United States. For example, at a restaurant, sometimes you think about your choice based on price perhaps, and in the US, you do quick mental math to add up what you are thinking about getting, but then you think, well, and then at the end there will be a little bit of taxes to pay, and you try and roughly estimate what you think that will be, but then you will also think, okay, I will have to add about a 15 to 20 or 25% tip on top of that rough number, and based on all of this uncertainty, you quickly try and estimate how much more your meal will be than the price you're seeing listed before deciding what to order. It isn't until the bill comes that you get the fun surprise of how much you will actually be paying. In Germany, they have simplified this budget decision-making moment by including the tax into all displayed prices and don't have the tipping culture like what exists in the US because service industry workers don't live off of tips. You don't have to tip, but generally if you are happy with the service received, when the bill comes, you would round it up to the next whole dollar, or maybe you have a bill for 37 euro, you would round it up to 40 euro, and that rounded up bit would be the tip. There's different ways of people calculating their tips, with 10% kind of being considered the cap percentage. Nonetheless, when you sit down and see a schnitzel for 13 euro, you know at the end of the meal, you will owe 13 euro, or maybe 15 euro if you want a tip. Easy. Again, this isn't just at restaurants. Go to a German grocery store, see bread listed at 3 euro, an apple for 25 cents, and eggs for euro 50. You know you will pay 4.75 euro at checkout because the taxes are already included in the listed prices. Simple math. In the US, you see the listed price and you know you have to mentally add a percentage on top of that. And for someone like me who can't keep track of that in my own head, it's always a surprise at checkout what I actually owe. Overall, a way simpler and way more transparent system in Germany, in my opinion. Something that comes with the territory of being an American in a European country YouTuber is receiving completely unrelated comments to a video's topic about the American healthcare system. I make a video about German versus American fashion. I'll receive a comment like, oh, you wanna know what's always in fashion? Affordable healthcare. I make a video about how no American has ever heard of Quark. No American knows about proper health insurance. And I get it. The American healthcare system is a very polarizing topic, and many Americans hold very strong opinions about how they feel about the various European healthcare systems as well, usually boiling them down to something like evil socialism. But I'm here to tell you there are a few things that the German healthcare system definitely makes way less complicated than the American healthcare system that I don't feel like is talked about enough, so I'm gonna talk about it today. In the US, wanna visit a doctor? Gotta check to make sure they accept your insurance first. Doctors are able to decide whether or not they want to work with certain insurance companies or not based on their personal preferences, and therefore, if you don't check before visiting, you might be stuck footing a huge bill out of pocket because they won't work with your insurance company. Typically, this can be a simple search online or call to the doc to ask if they are in your network, but sometimes it can be complicated, like doctors who are part of more than one practices. Consumers may also run into billing troubles if their doctor operates practices in different locations and accepts different insurance plans at each. Adding to the confusion is the fact that even if a physician is in a consumer's insurance network, the hospital or clinic she works at may not be, or vice versa. In Germany, there are some doctors that work with private insurance companies only, and who the 90% of Germans who are publicly insured can't visit. Otherwise, you just go to the most convenient or preferred doctor to you and you don't have to worry about anything. In fact, we have never once looked up if a doctor would accept our insurance or not. It's so much easier just to go to the doctor rather than worrying about whether or not the doctor that is most convenient for you wants to work with your insurance company or not, or whether or not you will have to foot a larger bill just because of that. Besides just this, one of the weirdest experiences for us at a German doctor's office is when we're walking out. In Germany, you see the physician, you get taken care of, then you leave. Simple. In the US, you see the physician, you get taken care of, then you must go find out how much you have to pay before you can leave, because you will have to pay a copay for seeing a doctor. A copay is basically your share of paying for the doctor's visit that you share with the insurance company, and for say a typical physician visit, it'll be around $15 or $30. Not a massive bureaucratic difference, but man, it still feels so weird for us, in a good way of course, almost like we are dining and dashing when we go to a German doctor and leave without paying for anything because the insurance just simply covers it. Now, it's not that copays don't exist in Germany. I'm talking about general physicians here. But copays do exist for some things like prescription drugs or when you go to the hospital, but those are typically capped at just €10 for a prescription drug or €10 a day for hospital stays. And the most complicated and bureaucratic process of all is paying for medical bills in the US. You first have to make sure you reach your deductible, generally on average around $1,500 before the insurance really starts covering for anything. But then doctors will send the bills to the insurance companies. The insurance companies decide what they want to pay. Then you will sometimes receive bills for the rest of the amount you must pay way later down the line. I once had a stint where I was in and out of hospitals in the US for some various medical issues, and for months I would receive random bills for huge amounts from the hospital as they nickel and dimed me after the insurance decided how much they were willing to cover. It literally got to a point where I called the hospital and asked, are we done yet? Have I not paid this same bill over and over? And what's the point of insurance if I keep getting these bills to pay myself? In Germany, much like the copay, I go to the doctor, I leave, I move on with my life as insurance covers basically everything. In the odd case I do get a bill, for example, I had to pay for a dental cleaning that wasn't covered by insurance here in Germany once. I simply paid once, uploaded the receipt for insurance, and still got a reimbursement for part, and then we were done. Very simple and less stress inducing. To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is, what's a word you always have a hard time spelling? Mine is bureaucratic. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in my next video. Generally, the more fatty, salty, or sweet adding to the confusion is the fact that even if a physician in a consumer's insurance network, adding to the confusion is the fact that even if a physician is in a consumer's insurance network,